It feels a little like I'm being gaslighted by Digimon 2020.
Here's the new villain. We beat the new villain. We move on. Here's the new villain. We beat the new villain. We move on. Here's the new villain. We beat the new villain. We move on. Here's the new villain. We beat the new villain. We move on. Here's the new villain.
Run. Welcome to Podages, your friendly eight-legged dog-bus companion for the 2020 Digimon Adventure Reboot. This week we're discussing episode 66, The Last Miracle, The Last Power. I'm your host, Jeff Ruberg, and before I introduce my guest this week, I'm excited to have on, I wanted to give a little explanation of what's happening next week, because the plan is loosely to have a special crossover episode with two other Digimon podcasts, Lost in Translationmon and With the Will, but because we're all in 3 different time zones across the world, the scheduling is a little tricky for that, so we're actually going to be recording that like right after the finale airs, so the normal community feedback and stuff is going to be a little hard to do on that schedule, so I feel kind of bad for having the special finale episode and then not having any community feedback. So instead of having the normal call for questions and through reviews and stuff, I think what I'm going to do is host a live watch of the finale when I want to say airs, but when it goes on Crunchyroll in the US, which is going to be 7:30 Pacific time on Saturday. So I will be posting about this on Twitter and stuff and giving more information, but that's generally the plan. On Discord, watch the finale live, enjoy the end of the season with a couple other Digimon fans. So yeah, tune in for that. And without further ado, I'm excited to welcome back to the podcast the managing editor of Anime Feminist and co-host of the Trash and Treasures podcast. Welcome back, Vrai.
Thanks for having me back. One last ride. Yay.
Yeah. I was excited to have you on one last time for, to see how this show that you spent a lot of time watching, how it ended.
A longer amount of time than I have spent watching an anime in a stretch of time, shall we say.
Yeah. So did you watch any episodes to catch up to this latest one?
A couple. So I watched this episode, the episode before it with the lore dump. I saw the 54, the Mad Max episode, and I watched the really terrible Hot Spring episode against my better judgment.
Oh yeah, I was like, oh, should I recommend this to Vrai or not? Because it is a Joe episode, but it's also like terrible. But then I figured maybe you'd be curious to see.
Yeah, the worst part is that I meant to watch 60, but I kind of ran out of time before the recording because like that seems nice. And I was gonna watch the Rosamon episode too because I like to watch Mimi things. But Jeff, I don't know if you know this, but there's so much anime.
Oh yes,
there's so much anime all the time, and I'm tired.
It's endless, and it just keeps coming, and it keeps also getting worse. Or like all the animators are spread so thin, and
yeah, it's really depressing every time you read a news story. It's yeah.
Oh, but I mean, of all the stuff there is to watch, you spent 23 minutes watching the Joe Hot Spring episode.
Yeah, I did. I'm gonna level with you. I found a browser extension that lets you speed up Crunchyroll videos.
Oh.
So I did technically. I at least watched it at an accelerated rate, which is an appropriate way to consume whatever that was. Bad. It was bad. I feel like I traded in getting to watch some of the more nice, fun episodes of this Crest arc to watch a thing that is a bad train wreck featuring a character I like, which is pretty on brand for me, if we're honest.
I mean, I'm curious what you had heard about the show, aside from, like me asking you to come on and like giving you suggestions and stuff. Like, had you heard through the grapevine anything about the episode since?
Almost nothing. I think there's you and one other mutual, I think, are the only people on my timeline still watching the series, which it wasn't a lot of people I follow in the first core or two, but it was at least a handful. And that's pretty much dwindled down to kind of people doing it for their job.
Yeah, I think in the first couple cores there was a lot of like I felt like a lot of excitement to be like, oh, this person, I didn't even know this person liked Digimon, they're watching it, or like, I thought this person was only on the fence about Digimon, but they're curious about this. Wow, so cool. And now it's like, yeah, kind of it's just a few stragglers left is what it feels like.
Although in the great circle of life, I think the first time you had me on as a guest, I recommended Den-O Coil, and then now the new Digimon series is just Den-O Coil, so it all comes full circle.
Yeah, I was trying to remember which one the first. Oh yeah, you were first on for that. The one where Matt Yamato joined the group for the first time.
Yeah, the Fortress episode. It was an alright episode.
Yeah, there was so much potential back then.
Yeah, I just come on to this show to make you sad.
Yeah. Well,
I'm sorry, folks at home.
I'm happy to catch up with you about it. No. But I guess on that note, let's get erased and thrown into the background since we're not main characters to discuss this week's episode 66, The Last Miracle, The Last Power, aka The Last Our War Game. And there's spoiler policy for this week is the same as always, but there's only one episode left, and I mean, I'm not going to be spoiling what there's like a text synopsis of what happens in the episode, I think, and I'm not going to be spoiling that. But that's all there's left of the show, and yeah, I might spoil anything in Adventure Zero 2, but not other seasons. So yeah, this week on Digimon Adventure: 2020 Square Back at the Adventure of Taichi. I only have one more week to actually say that. Anyway, they fight Negamon, who also kind of evolves into a Batamon, who they never name in the episode, but it's the big Pride from Fullmetal Alchemist thing. And they fight, and the four non-main characters get deleted, and then they're floating in the space between the real world and the digital world. And then the hope and prayers of kids around the world causes a miracle, and everyone sends their powers to Taichi and Yamato, and Omegamon forms, and then the episode ends. That was an episode.
That was a really brutal metaphor for this entire series, wasn't it? I was watching the ghost scene thinking, I've really liked the horror moments of this series, kind of the fake Tokyo episode, and I feel like some of the spooky imagery that this team has kind of a deft hand for. So some of that I liked, and then, I stepped back from that for a moment and thought, oh god, the anime is acknowledging that it cares so little about these characters that it full on just deleted them from the action and nothing changed.
Yeah, I was getting flashbacks to that whole, I forgot how long the stretch was, like 8 episodes, where the same four of them were, I guess it was 5 because also Hikari was there for part of it, but basically the same four of them were just in a gazebo. And
yeah, just commenting, which this episode did also have a bit of that, in that its idea of writing dialogue for the whole team was having each character in succession say their partner's name and or reiterate the theme of the episode in a line before we moved on to the next action set piece. I didn't even hate this episode, but my god.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I think like you were saying, like I think one of the strongest points was that cool, creepy horror design aesthetic of Abatomon was great, but also it's not even like joking to say it's, like, it's Pride from Fullmetal Alchemist, because apparently the designer has, like explicitly mentioned on Twitter, like, yeah, this was inspired by Pride from Fullmetal Alchemist. So
yeah, you just did the thing. Although I have to spoiler, I guess, looking ahead to the questions we got, you know who you are, and you're my favorite person. The person who made a Yu-Gi-Oh reference.
Oh yes. I think they knew exactly what they were doing. But yeah, so like that like horror aesthetic was done really well, but it also made me just want to be like, okay, what if I just watched Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood instead right now? Like,
mm-hmm. Well, and what I liked specifically was the scene where, the B team, shall we call them, is floating. They're kind of floating silhouette ghosts, and they are dealing with that nebulous horror of I can hear people, but I can't see them, which is effectively unsettling in a way for a kid's show. It's one of those things where it's kind of spooky on multiple layers, and I love when children's media does that. I think it's some of the best stuff that ends up sticking with you until adulthood, usually in shows that are overall stronger, so you remember them for more than a year after they've aired, but still. I really liked that, and it technically fit in with the theme this episode had going for it, which is that 4chan made a monster so strong that it's going to destroy the world. Is that not sorry, was that not what the theme of the episode was?
Yeah, 4chan and Twitter, and I'm just like, is this social commentary? Is this just it was like last episode's big lore dump was a huge mix of like, it feels like this is almost saying something, and also it's just, there's just everything is just Deus Ex Machinas. It's just, oh, where'd these Digivices come from? The world just as a singular entity, I guess.
Part of me, I will admit, was leery about talking about that whole thing, because I assume that you guys have talked about the alt-right Tamers thing.
Yeah.
That's already been covered on this podcast, I have to assume, and it made me a little bit leery about talking about negativity on the internet in an extremely broad and non-specific sense. But I think by the end of the episode, I had at least come around to this is about as well as Digimon can be expected to talk about the experience of being online TM, in that how to put it, it's it's extremely broad strokes, but there is something very sweet about representing the internet as not just a terrible, bad place and we all need to cut our cords and go back to grass or what have you, but that the internet is it contains, both. And maybe it's just because it's redoing our war games again, but there were some warm fuzzies to be had that I got from everybody's dreams and hopes and wishes and positive YouTube comments. I'm kidding, those aren't real. Powering up our heroes and giving them the emotional strength to go on. I'm a sucker. I bought in. It was nice.
Yeah, that's true. Like the way that framed, like the toxic negativity of the internet as being just one of two sides, and like, there is positivity there as well, is let's just say much better than framing the internet as like one man versus the internet's reaction to that one man, which is anyway.
Yeah. So in a show that is, for ostensibly for kids who have never known a world without the internet, I like a show trying to emphasize that this thing that will always be in your lives can be used powerfully for good. Like, I think that is a net positive as far as writing goes.
Yeah. I feel like I agree with you that that theme is cool and neat, but it also, like, the parallels in this episode to our war game, I felt came off, I don't know, maybe it'd be different if I hadn't seen our war game, and like, because I assume most of the kid audience that is watching this has not seen the original OVA film, whatever it is, and so maybe it would work better for them. But for me, I was just like, this feels like such a like shallow copy, in that like, okay, these wishes are like metaphysical concepts being sent through the thin barrier between worlds that has been, like destroyed by Negamon, so it makes sense that like the worlds are kind of merging while it's happening. But then like randomly they're also being represented as messages on Koshiro's computer, and it's like, I mean, that made sense, like plot sense in a war game, and I feel like it's just copying it without it making any sense in the moment. But I don't know, there's enough emotion that I guess it was okay.
Oh no, I definitely think you have a point. I was thinking the same thing about Omegamon, where if we put on our forgetting hats for a second and imagine that this is an episode that came in from a different show, this is a really cool first appearance of Omegamon, where it takes the power, it takes the whole power of the whole world to form this spirit bomb, and he gets a cool transformation sequence and stuff. Except we have already seen this character so many times in decidedly more lackluster fashion, and so it feels absurd. It feels a little like I'm being gaslighted by Digimon 2020. Like it's pretending that this is the first time we're seeing Omegamon.
Yeah, it's like there's just something missing there. Like, if those first two appearances had been like, I don't know, it was like a shadow of Omegamon, or like it was like half corporeal and so like it wasn't fully powered or something. But it's just like the same, like the end result is the same thing we've seen twice already in the show, and then multiple times in other media to a better degree most of the time. So I'm like, yeah, this is the best appearance in this show, but why did the other ones happen?
It's very odd. It almost feels like this episode was like several key points were planned ahead of time and then everything else was very Scrabble. Like it feels like the concept for this episode has been in the can for a long time, and then oops, there were 50 episodes in between when we planned this and when it had to go in sequence, and so it makes no sense. I have no evidence for that, but it's how it feels.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, if there had to be like, I forget how long the break was, if there was a maybe 10 or so episode break for COVID after episode 3 aired, like maybe there were 10 more episodes that would have contextualized this better, or I don't know, made the last appearance, the one like in the fake Tokyo, made that less egregiously bad.
I'm just baffled by the entire shape of this anime. I assume that it couldn't simply go on break and refigure things because the anime industry is a nightmare. And also, we have this in particular as a children's, franchise and that has to sell the card game. That's not the animator's fault, but the result is that it just keeps retreading the same arcs over and over again, drowning a little bit more each time and having these minor little peaks of success that never really add up to anything because each time they take another run at the story shape they clearly wanted to tell, it feels like, well, why did we waste our time on the last 12 episodes you had us watch?
Yeah, I feel like the picture that's coming increasingly clear to me is that this is like the original Venture, but kind of like churned through the meat grinder a couple times to make it more processed and homogenized to aiming for that child audience, and it's not gonna be the same up to the same quality as the original show for the adults, but just churn it out so you can get more stuff out there for the kids to watch. And I think it's been successful in that. Like, it's been popular in at least the TV ratings in Japan and stuff. And I feel like it's rebooted the brand in terms of the card game being really successful now. And now we're getting this new era where there's a new Digimon show airing directly after the last one for the first time since 2002, 2003. So that's really exciting. But yeah, I guess I'm okay with it. We're us getting this homogenized hot dog meat to get us there, but it's it's definitely not gonna, for the diehard fans, I think it's not gonna live in our consciousness for very long.
So what you're saying is that this is the bizarro inverse situation of the Lupin the Third franchise. So many people would disagree with me about that. Blue Jacket's really popular. It's just not for me. I'm just bitter.
Blue Jacket's not the latest one, right?
It is, yeah. That's parts 4, 5, and now 6. This kind of modern, semi-episodic, semi-narrative arc amalgam that it does not work for me, but that revival was kicked off by the woman called Fujiko Mine being the 40th anniversary special after this franchise had kind of been in a lull, but nobody talks about that one because they're cowards. Anyway, you could cut all this.
No, that's cool. From my perspective, the only one I hear about is the woman called Fujiko Mine, because that's, I guess, the particular lens that I have into the series.
So you have good taste in mutuals then.
Yeah, exactly.
I see what you mean, though. Sometimes it's, it's what it is. It's more transparent than usual in what it mechanistically is supposed to do as a marketing object, more so than a work of art. But maybe it will have the net good of being able to, of letting more artists have creative freedom with future projects. And maybe it's a little sad that that's what the original adventure story is now to the franchise. But also, people got, last Evolution Kizuna, and that's kind of a proper goodbye. So that's not nothing.
Yeah. Yeah, I think if there hadn't also been Last Evolution Kizuna around the same time, I would have been more bummed out about this reboot. But so it's been all right, I guess. In the end, I guess I had a lot more hope for this episode, for the finale climactic battle of the series being more of a breaking the tradition of long-running children's toei shows of basically not showing off great animation in the finale because they were working on the premiere of the next season and wanted to show off the great talent and great animation for that premiere. I hoped that since this was a series that seemed to be focusing much more on the raw animation spectacle, that I thought they might divert that trend. But I guess this feels like for a show that we expect the finale to not be spectacular, it was pretty good. And for a show that has built up its entire premise being the action spectacle, it's just a bland okay episode. So
yeah, the moments that stuck with me were definitely not the splashy moments, but those few moments that had, like we talked about before, the slightly more innovative art direction. But as far as movement and choreography and all of that, it's just kind of okay.
Yeah, I feel like the strongest parts of the episode were attributed to the score. And some of them were just moments where I was like, there's not actually that much interesting happening on screen, but it's just good music playing. And so I was like, this music is good. But there was also the moment when basically War Greymon and Agumon do a big attack, and I don't know if it's Negamon or Abatamon at that point, but basically just negates the entire attack, and the music cuts out like right after the attack is negated, and that was really done. A really well done moment. But yeah, it also the whole like all the unimportant kids channeling their crest energy, whatever, through the like channeling them into two different. I don't think you've seen Frontier. Is that right?
I have not. I have a friend who really likes it, but that's about all I know about it.
There's basically like a big climactic moment in Frontier where this basically the same premise happens, where like the unimportant characters are on the sidelines and they channel their energy through two different main characters in this same way. And I was like, I don't know, that it made sense in the plot of that show, but in this one, it's just like there's no reason for them to be like, I forget which ones go to which. I assume it's gendered. Well, like not really gendered. I guess it is kind of gendered. Like Koshiro and Joe, their crests going to Takaru's crest, and the girl's crest going to the girl. But there's no reason for that to be happening in the plot mechanics of Adventure, whereas it's just like copying a moment from Frontier that's not the fact that the other kids are sidelined is like thought what everyone hated about that. So why'd they copy that anyway?
Because this series, as near as I can tell, just kind of assimilates and reproduces homage without thought to context.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it.
Now, once again, sorry, listeners at home, I do come on here to be depressing.
Well, kind of can't help it when that's what we got on the platter for this week. I think let's move into some 3-word reviews.
Yeah, there's some good ones. I liked them.
Joseph Nosif said, Yamato stays robbed.
At Pablo Castrol, 4 Digidestin nerfed.
Yeah. At Solar is GX. Negamon is Pride. Yeah, basically.
Yeah, basically. And at PDX Anime follows with, FMA's gonna sue.
And Ursamer Black said, Mouth Tentacles Nightmare.
At Austin LC23, great monster design.
Bored Individual, Wargame again.
At Dak and Jaster, epic, despite everything.
At Mega Gigdramon, sending good vibes.
At Giga Megadramon, Omegamon, wow. And then they have the emoji of the eye rolling.
Yep. And Taikamiya 101, where is Alt? I guess this is stuff that was this. I'm trying to remember when you were last on, had you seen Blitz Greymon? I forget if he appeared.
I think so, because the last time I was on was right before the end of the Millennium Monarch. So like
right.
around 48, 50.
Yeah, so I think Blitz Greymon had appeared, but not Kreskarumon. So yeah, the fact that Taichi and Yamato got alternate Mega Evolutions, which everyone who looks them up can see that those two alternates combine into another Omegamon form called Omegamon Alter S, and
Ooh.
It's like, okay, clearly they're heading in that direction, right? If they happen to include those two, and then there's still one episode they could do it, but I don't know. There's a lot of like the same thing with how people are reacting to the fact that Leomon's alive. A lot of people are like riding so much on like whether Omegamon Alter S appears or not, or whether Leomon dies or not, and I'm like, the show hasn't made me care either way for any of those things. So
yeah, it's just a kind of a checklist. But like, I guess at this point, if it provides dopamine from seeing the cool design, that's a good thing.
Yeah. Like I was in favor of there being some, enhancement to Omegamon to make it different from the past 2 times. But at this point, it's like, is it going to matter? Especially if it only appears for like a second.
Yeah, is it worse if it only gets to show up for a second rather than a full episode that gets a cool fight scene?
Yeah.
Andy Lucas OE says, Yivo's digitized genticles, which I don't understand but has powerful vibes.
Yes, I'm very confused about 2 out of 3 of these words. I understand digitized. That's the only word I understand. But Lucas Kukas said, very cool slideshow. Yeah.
And yeah. And at @N_podcast, very hungry Negamon.
I actually misread this at first and thought it was like hungry Negamon, like hungry hippos. And
right.
Yeah, that's basically what we got here. And moving on to listener questions and comments. First off, from Joseph Snosif, who said, this was the most bonkers example of Digimon 2020's attitude towards Yamato, literally having him fade away so Taichi can activate their shared evolution. And they include images showing how like Yamato's kind of pushed aside and then like all the energy goes to Taichi. And I see the frustration here, but I feel like they still like after this moment gave the like Taichi and Yamato like not quite fist bumping, but like their devices coming together. So I was like, I don't think like Yamato is shafted a little bit, but not nearly as bad as the other 4.
Yeah, he is still subsumed into the Taichi show, but also he's had more to do than literally anyone else who is not named Taichi.
Yeah. Like Yamato is like, like 60% Tai Chi. Everyone else is like 0% Tai Chi, basically, in the eyes of the show. And Andy Lucas sent in a picture of a random kid in the sidelines that they hope is Takuya. And I think it's a stretch. But, people can dream.
I believe in this dream. I support you. I support the possible background animator who maybe put this in without informing anybody and waited for one person on Twitter to find it.
Yeah, I wish it were more explicit. Like, isn't there... Now I'm forgetting. I think there's one of the 02 movies that has basically Rika Irugi in the background. Yeah, in Revenge of Diabormon, there's someone just like it's pretty clear that it's the same design, and someone just snuck it in. So
yeah, see precedent.
Yeah. PDX Anime said, so I feel like this episode takes a lot of notes from other anime. Dragon Ball Z, our war game, and even a little bit of the original adventure. I wish the ending felt more original and that Negamon looked more unique or menacing. And again, WTF is Devimon doing there. Negamon too. I at least appreciate that the two of them were there, remember, like, that the show remembered they existed.
Oh no, see, that's what I was going to ask, is because I was going to watch 64, but I also ran out of time because I prioritized the bad offensive episode. But so they hadn't come back to the Devimon Angemon thing since literally he died?
No, okay, so they have touched on it a couple times, and in I think like maybe a couple episodes after you dropped off, it's revealed that like Devimon, basically in the episode where Angemon evolves into Holy Angemon, it's revealed that Devimon was Angemon's shadow. Like he basically formed from Angemon's data while he was like imprisoned. So like when he was saying like, oh, my old friend, it was like they are literally two halves of the same entity, kind of.
It's literally the Simon and Garfunkel song.
Sure. Which song is that?
Sound of Silence. Hello, darkness, my old friend.
Oh, yes. Yeah, basically. And like it's come up in like very brief passing, like Patamon having a like vision of Devimon being like, this negativity is coming, the world's ending, kind of. I don't know. So it's I appreciated getting answers to that, but also it raised even more like questions about why that was never addressed when Devimon was around. Yeah,
that's a really cool concept that I feel like you could have had as a major part of the arc where Devimon was the main villain.
Yeah, there's a lot of that idea that like, oh, this is a cool idea on paper, but wow, sure didn't come off that way when it was executed, is a running theme through the season, I think. A lot of these concepts you like take out of, like write down and then look on paper and they're like, wow, that sounds like it'd be awesome. Why wasn't it like that watching it? Yeah, but yeah, I guess I agree with this kind of like the end of the show. I appreciate that it's a new final villain, because I remember during the show people were speculating like, oh, is it going to be X or Y or Z? I appreciate it's a new design, but I can understand the sentiment. Wishing that like it was more original in how the finale was executed. But I think since it's a reboot of Adventure, I never really expected that. I never expected the ending to be like so completely original. And this is the comment you're alluding to before, that Mega Digimon referenced the Abatamon looking like Morphing Jar, and they're glad that Morphing Jar found work after Yu-Gi-Oh! With Bakura. Good comparison. And they basically, the comment, it's a little too long to read on there, but basically they wish they had a better like way of the team working together, like the team, like sharing attacks, Wargreymon using Zudamon's hammer, like Metal Garurumon flash freezing the enemy and then Hoemon melting them, those kind of things. And that in comparison, it felt kind of underwhelming. And yeah, those are cool concepts that like, I just feel like at the beginning of the show, it felt like there were a lot of things that were like, okay, let's go to the drawing board. We have these iconic characters. What can we do with them? And that feels like the kind of energy that could have done with the finale, but oh well. Yeah. And I guess this is why the original series back in the day had movies coming out like Our War Game or Revenge of Diabormon, to kind of be like, okay, well, the show itself, the finale is kind of lackluster, but here's this movie where we actually can go ham on the animation.
Right. Which I respect, but
yeah.
No. But then I am always team lackluster animation doesn't bother me too much as long as the composition and writing are good, and I don't think that this has those either.
Yeah, yeah, it's true. It's like it shouldn't. If it's the only thing going for it, then it's going to feel very shallow. And I feel like at various points, that's what the series has felt like. That's the main thing going for it. And then when that disappears too,
Yeah.
it's there's not much left. But yeah. Actor Rykut said, "We finally got a Megamon stock evolution sequence after all these years, and while I'm actually glad we finally have one, the animation was really lackluster. The sequence itself was also really lame. Can't believe they didn't give the same love as the other evolutions." And I thought this was an interesting point to bring up because, like, I didn't realize until people were talking about Omegamon's appearance in Last Evolution Kizuna that Omegamon's never had a formal evolution sequence before. Like, he's appeared so many times that I was like, of course he's had one. But every time Omegamon's appeared, it's always been this, like, one-off grand appearance where it's kind of it's not like a normal evolution sequence like we normally get. So it was really notable that this time there was, like a standard stock evolution sequence, and that it was not great.
Yeah.
I kind of expected that, considering how well the stock evolution sequences for War Greymon and Metal Grumon have been fantastic. And yeah, it makes sense logistically because, like, they're never going to actually reuse this. So if there's one they're going to deprioritize, it makes sense to be the one that only appears once. But
Still kind of a bummer as your big finale moment. Did we skip Giga Mega Dramon? I guess they had kind of the same general vibe of Omegamon being sort of a disappointing reveal.
Yeah, and well, Giga Mega also mentioned, like, disappointment about like there being no alternate Omegamon form, and yeah, especially with the card game recently had a set. Well, it's not recent in Japan, but it's recent coming out in English. But a whole set themed around Omegamon or Omnimon. And one thing that kind of, like, that set has made me more endeared to Omegamon or Omnimon as a concept. But it's also made me realize that, like, the normal Omegamon is the most bland version. Like, there's several different forms and all this stuff. And so after being excited about, like, Zwart Defeat, X Antibody, Alter S, all these different forms, it's like, oh yeah, we got the most vanilla one. Okay.
I can kind of respect the cleanness of the base Omegamon design, but it is the kind of thing that I feel like needs really, really strong animation to back it up, or something to make it pop, because you have that whole, it's that principle like in cooking competition shows where if you're going to do the simple thing, you have to do it perfectly. Otherwise, it's going to seem really not impressive.
Yeah, and it makes me, in retrospect, I don't think I quite realized that every time before this show that Omegamon has appeared, it has been with that grand animation scale. Like, it's only been in movies or, well, in Try, which is more debatable. But yeah, I think that I kind of forgot that Omegamon is such a simple design because it's usually handled so well. Yeah. Austin LC23 said, "How do you feel about the prayer hope thing? Do you feel like using it previously was good build up or just cheapens the whole thing? I think having spent no time in the human world makes it less impactful either way. Shout out to Orchestral Bake the Train for carrying the episode." I thought it was... I enjoyed the whole, like, all the kids praying and that being the energy coming from them, because it is the same concept as in, I guess, I don't know if you saw in the Millennium episode, that basically the same thing that happens, but it's just with the Digimon in the digital world.
Mm-hmm.
But this I enjoyed because as soon as I saw a feather appear, I was like, oh my god, is that how Megamon forms this time? Just a random feather appears, and then it's literally going to be like the most bland Deus Ex Machina every single time. So at least when it was revealed that it was like, I think that was just one of, like, the materialization of the hope, and, like, there were all these sources of light or feathers or whatever, then I was like, okay, this is better than I was going to the worst case, and it's not as bad as that.
Right. Yeah, I kind of conceptually, again, right, like the idea of having a story where this thing works in the digital world, and then you repeat it with the humans, and it shows that, we're all connected. But I feel like they also mentioned, not spending much time in the human world. I think I agree that while a neat parallel in concept, it does kind of undermined it in practice.
Yeah, and it feels like when you take shortcuts like that, it just feels kind of like, oh, all the kids are watching, and it's like, why? Why is it just the kids watching? Like, it's I don't like. I feel like that concept worked really well in our war game. For some reason, that just isn't connecting here. So it just feels like I was saying before, like a shallow copy of the beats of the original without contextualizing them. So
yeah, it worked in our war games, and it worked even better in our war games to Summer Wars, because then he iterized on it so that everybody was connected and using this world. But it's a kind of a third times an imitation work here.
Yeah, and I think it worked well in both our war game and Summer Wars because it's like kind of played off as like disasters happening to everyone, but it's hard to know like what the real source of the disaster is, or like who's really helping to solve the crisis, and so it's kind of like at least in our war game, it's played off as like these hopeful kids around the world are able to recognize that it's these other fellow kids that are the real ones saving the world. And so it's like it's kind of like a kids are able to see through with their pure innocence, able to see through the situation kind of underlying vibe, I feel. And I think it's kind of similar in Summer Wars, but I think at that point, in Summer Wars it's kind of public knowledge what's going on and stuff, so it's not quite the same situation. But here it's just kind of like these things are physically happening to the whole world, everyone can see what's going on, but I guess kids are just magical and they're able to see more or better or some reason, or the camera's just focusing on them because it's a show for kids. I don't know. It's not quite the same subtext.
Like, it's cool. It's a well-established kid show thing to want to give your kid viewers a thing that, like, this is something that you could do and it makes you special, even though you often feel disempowered in the world compared to grown-ups. And I respect that, but I think that could be a great storytelling tool. I just don't think it comes off here.
Yeah. And the last comment from Andy Lucas Oe, forgive me if I forget, but now isn't every Omegamon appearance tied to a Negamon? Argamon's first attempt at revival, this finale, and maybe Shademon from the Fake Tokyo episodes? It almost looks like it could be part of Negamon's evolution line. If true, OMG, a consistent theme in Adventure 2020. And I don't know, this feels like a stretch with the middle appearance because like we still it's still unclear. The organizational hierarchy of the villains of the show is completely unclear.
Yep.
I guess one thing that you missed, Vrai, was that wait, now I'm trying to remember what the reveal even was because it was vague and confusing. But I think what they were trying to say is that the assumption was always that like Devimon was working for Millenniumon, right? But then the reveal in one of the last couple episodes was more that Devimon was driven mad by Negamon, and that it was more like the reverse, like Millenniumon was serving Devimon kind of, but not quite. Anyway, like I feel like they've just been so vague and not giving us any information about how these villains are connected.
Yeah, it's a bummer because I actually really liked once again, I really liked the theory of the big info dump in this. I think it was this episode about how Digimon are creatures of cycles, and as that felt like a really potentially potent usage of this specifically digital space, and how it would breed just a completely different approach to life and death, even though it obviously ties into to Shintoist beliefs and that kind of thing, and those sorts of themes. But then it was only really brought up here, and it's not consistently applied through the story. So that's not true. I guess it did come up in a genuinely neat way in that Rebellimon episode, which I really liked. But other than that, yeah, it's so scattershot. It feels like highly dependent on which writer got to work on which episode and how much time they had, and nobody had a consistent roadmap of what went where.
Yeah. And like the most interesting ideas were just relegated to like a tiny bit in a speech. And it's like, okay, we're not actually going to devote the time and energy to make this a consistent element of the show, but like you have the task of writing this one monologue, put all the interesting ideas there.
Yeah. Rip.
Yeah. But I guess in closing out this episode, how would you rate this one singular episode out of 5 stars?
I guess I'll be generous and give it a 3. The show's almost done. I'm sure the animators are tired.
Yeah, I'm gonna be a little less generous and give it a 2, just because it felt like I had to rewatch it just to remember like what actually happened of substance aside from Megamon forming.
That's fair. I might have to demote it to a 2.5. It does get the 0.5 for the spooky ghost scene though.
Yeah. But yeah, our MVPs. I'm trying to think who even was a character.
Right? Like, I don't have one.
I think I'll give it 2. a Bottomon just for having that cool Pride from Fullmetal Alchemist aesthetic.
Yeah, that works. No, I got nothing. I
Just
don't have one.
empty, blank nothingness. That is Negamon's goal, apparently, to erase everything nothingness. It worked, I guess.
I'll give it to Tentamon for being a good supportive boy
Yeah.
when Koshua was worried.
Yeah. So, it's kind of a bummer to go into this final episode not really having any hopes or expectations.
It really is. That makes me sad.
Yeah, but I mean, on a meta level, I'm very excited and hopeful for Ghost Game. So I'm kind of like, yeah, let this end. Let's be done with it and move on to Ghost Game. I'm excited. How have you been hearing about Ghost Game? Do you have any excitement?
Yeah, I saw the poster and I saw the synopsis, and I was joking, but also not, because it really is quite similar to the premise of Deno Coil. So, in that sense, yeah, I am pretty much looking forward to seeing it. I will be curious to see. I guess I'm sort of wary because of how merch driven this show was, but I'll give it a few episodes to see if it'll be, a show that will have merch or a merch driven show, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I do think it has a lot more potential to be a better show than this one, but it's also like it doesn't have the adventure characters attached to it, and I totally understand people who just aren't going to give it the same shot that they gave this one because of that. Like that's totally fair. Like there's a lot of reason to have emotional attachment to the adventure characters, even if this show didn't pay that off well. But yeah, I hope it's engaging and interesting enough to keep people interested in it.
It seems as though it's going for a slightly spookier, darker tone, at least in the marketing. So I wonder if that will draw in the people who were fans of Tamers and are having a hard time right now.
Yeah. And yeah, just very thankful that there's no direct connection there, if you know what I mean.
I do.
Yeah. So yeah, before we close out the show, do you want to recommend another piece of media that you've been enjoying lately?
What have I been enjoying? I feel like between the last time I was on and now, I bought Drakengard 3, a thing I enjoyed very much and don't actually want to recommend because it's a hot, beautiful mess. So let's see. I will recommend a manga called Boys Run the Riot, which I have been just honestly enjoying so much. It is a currently ongoing manga about a trans boy who meets sort of a local delinquent in his school, and the two of them wind up starting a fashion brand together, where his friend is the marketer and he is the designer for the clothes. And it's a good, well drawn manga by a first-time artist, and it's a little bit special in that it's about a trans main character. But it's also written by a trans guy, and the entire localization team is also trans. So it's a really special little project. It's given me a lot of feelings, and I highly encourage folks to check it out.
Yeah, it sounds very exciting. I have the first volume waiting to read, and my stack of unread books keeps piling up.
Yeah, I get that. I'm in the same boat.
Yeah, and people should buy it and support it so it does not meet the same fate as Wandering Sun, but
Well, it hasn't been licensed by Fantagraphics. It's by a company that knows how to release works for a historically low income group. So I think we'll be okay on that front. I'm so bitter. I'm so bitter about that.
How much were those Wandering Sun volumes?
They were $20, and it was a nice hardcover with like essays in the back because Fantagraphics does prestige format, but it was a 15-volume series, and the people who needed to see it most simply could not be paying $20 a pop.
Yeah, so unfortunate.
Yeah, well, I've got complicated feelings about Wandering Sun. It was a very important manga.
Well, I'm going to recommend something much less important, but it's the concept of crocheting. I don't think I've talked about that on this podcast at all, but it's a fun little hobby. Especially, I'm always been looking for things to do while watching TV, especially the kind of shows that not watching anime with subtitles, but things that are in English and you can multitask a little better. And I really enjoy getting into crochet. It's really fun, and I really regret the like decades of my life where I was like, oh, that's a silly girly thing I don't want to try because it's for girls. That was stupid.
Oh, crochet is nice. I never had a hand for it, but people make so many beautiful things.
It's definitely not like easy to get started with, and it's definitely a big learning curve that I am still struggling with, but I can feel that improvement each time, which is a rewarding sensation. But I'm still so far away from actually making all that cool stuff that everyone else seems to be able to make. So someday.
Oh, I thought of another thing. Season 3 of What We Do in the Shadows just started, and it is a perfect sitcom, and everyone should watch it. Oh my god, I love it so much.
I always assumed it was like a very scary horror type show.
No. So the film was a faux documentary satire about by Taika Waititi, about a group of vampire roommates just screwing around on their day-to-day life. And so the TV show is also set up to be a fake documentary, but it takes place in a house in Staten Island with a married couple, with 4 vampires and their familiar, Guillermo, who has wanted to be a vampire ever since he saw Interview with the Vampire in 1994, and Antonio Banderas gave him hope of representation for Hispanic vampires. And if either that joke makes you laugh or it doesn't, and this show is for you or it isn't. But it's both a very smart show in terms of referencing the genre, but also in just really smart character writing that is aims to be easy to pick up any episode, but also is really good at growing the characters. It's extremely, extremely gay. I think just about every character is bi, and it's got slightly less sharp-edged, always sunny vibes. I think is a way to recommend it to people who aren't already horror fans.
That's very intriguing. I'm always on the lookout for like smart comedy shows.
Harvey Guillen is about the most charming lead on TV right now. He is just his role is very much the long-suffering type only sane man character, but he brings so much nuance and layers to it, and it's quite telling that this was a character who was meant to be originally fairly minor, and then he came in on auditioned, and now the entire show revolves basically around this character. It's really good. It's the dopamine I need in my life right now.
Cool. I'll check that. It kind of in some concepts it gives me like the Magicians vibes in terms of being like high concept comedy kind of. But maybe that's just because I was looking at Harvey Guillen's Wikipedia page and he was also on The Magicians. So, but yeah, I guess that brings us to the end of the show. This episode of Podages was brought to you by the Royal We, because no word in the English language works harder than Taichi saying, "We're the only ones that can stop this," when we all know he's the only one that's important. And last week's Digiprompt was in honor of Commandemon single-handedly saving the digital world. What is your favorite underrated character that you consider responsible for saving the entire world in their season? And I think I'm obligated to pick this answer because Andy Lucas OE chose Daigo for Digimon Adventure Tri, and to explain why is kind of Tri spoilers. But I am obligated because they found a clip from an episode of Podages where I said apparently Daigo is the best part of Tri. So I think they quoted me on the record. So
they got you there.
Yeah, they got me there. But this week's Digiprompt is in honor of Abadomon's Full Metal Alchemist inspirations. What iconic anime design would you want to see remixed into a Digimon design? And you can send any feedback to podages@digimon.com, to Podages on Twitter, or in the episode comments on podages.com. Check out the show notes to find a link to join our Discord server, and share the podcast with your friends who will send their magical support to you, even if they're unceremoniously deleted and pushed aside for the most important battle. And if this is your first episode, you can also find us on YouTube, Spotify, or wherever else you find podcasts. I don't know why you'd be finding us on the penultimate episode of the season, but it's always possible. But Vrai, thank you so much for coming back on and I guess saying goodbye to this season.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's been, even if the show overall has been really disappointing, it's been fun revisiting these characters and talking about it and kind of getting in touch with what people love about the larger franchise. So I'm really glad. I feel like I've learned a lot.
Cool. And if people want to find more of your work online, where can they check you out?
Well, they can go to animefeminist.com, and if they want to see the site I manage for and read articles and hear podcasts analyzing anime and manga through a feminist lens, they can find my freelancing work on Twitter at Vrai, or they can find the podcast I co-host with my wonderful partner about trash media and sort of the intersection. Basically, if you like what we talked about here, where people lament the great ideas that a work had and the utter failure to execute them, you will enjoy Trash and Treasures, which you can find on Twitter at TrashPod. I'm currently extremely behind on editing the most recent episode.
I know what that feeling is like. And I am definitely Jeff on Twitter, and if you want to find my guess why I am also extremely behind, but probably more behind, it's Love It a Wee Bit, which we'll have an episode soon, I swear, I hope. But thank you everyone for listening, and I'll be back next week to talk about episode 67, the end of the adventure. Bye!
Bye!
And remember, never stop digivolving.